on. All right, so today we have a list of topics. I'm just going to go over some updates. We're going to talk about data pipeline integration. Sasha's going to lead the discussion on that. Some discussion on whether we're going to pursue an open source foundation to move the project to neutral ground, and then kind of see where that takes us after. And so with that, I'll just do some quick updates on a couple of things that happened since last time. So let's see, what do we got since last release? Last release was like 20 days ago. First of all, want to highlight Christoph's contributions for helping us improve our EC2 networking story. So thank you very much, including things like details on subnet nodes and then security groups and details for network interfaces. And I noticed, Christoph, that like you had also added, so we have the EC2 private IP. And then so when I run the data, I'm getting things like we got the network interface. And it's like, it says it's the network interface for an ELB, but then it's not connected to anything yet in the graph. So I guess the next step would be maybe to connect that with the ELB then. Or maybe it's just a special case of my graph.
Yes, I remember I saw as well a gap somewhere.
Yeah, we can
do that.
Yeah, we can play with that later on. I know that you put together a more longer term plan with your issue that you filed. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then let's see, not that much commit activity happened in the past month, except some minor bugs. And oh yeah, so one thing that I do want to bring up just real quick is that I think Okta had a fix. So Okta changed their version. They released their 1.0 version of the API from the 004. And this ended up breaking a couple of different things. I'm not going to get into those details. You can follow this if you want to. And so as a result, I have set our Okta version to less than 1.0 because it breaks things right now. And if someone has time to fix that, please help. Details are in here. I don't have time to do that yet, so I've pinned this to like keep us at less than 1.0. And that's it for, I guess, this housekeeping update. And as far as, I do want to bring up that I added some, I guess, labels to help organize the issues a little bit more. So the one main label I want to bring up is this long-term improvement label. So these are the ideas that are going to take some thinking, but they're going to bring long-term improvement for what we do. And I'm pretty excited about these. So first one is near real-time updates. It discusses different ideas like streaming approaches for the graph. This one is related to, I think it's related to what Sasha's going to bring up in just a little bit about having a way to more quickly design sync jobs. So making it more generic. You specify the fields that you want to ingest and how you want that loaded, so that there's less code for the developer to write. Anyway, we'll get into a little bit more detail in not too long from now. And these last two talk about data reliability, things like playing with DAGs and things with, if one part of the sync object fails in cartography, then how do we handle that? And yeah, so this is just basically the things on our long-term roadmap. I did play around a little bit with DAGs a little bit. If you guys want to go and take a look at my current work under kind of neat. Like you can do some pipelining in AWS. So you can build an AWS pipeline here where the basic idea is that you have all your resources and the dependencies fan out like this. So the way to read this is, in order to compute permission relationships on resources, well, you have to sync the resources first. You have to sync the IAM part first, and only then can these stages begin. And so that's, anyway, I have a little bit of a mock-up here. We can play with that a little bit, but that is it that's it for me, basically. And I'll just bring up the minutes doc, just so that we have a piece of paper to look at. Any questions from you? Any questions or comments? Okay. I guess with that, we can talk about Sasha's data pipeline integration topic.
Yeah, so I think I forgot the person's name that was brought up last meeting as well, where the scenario that I've meant, my mental recap of the scenario is I'm already pulling the data needed for cartography elsewhere in a data pipeline, and I want to be able to load that data into cartography and do snapshots, right? So I believe that the other person had historical data of AWS configuration and wanted to be able to say, okay, at a point in time, what does the cartography data look like? I have similar scenario where I happen to work at Amazon, so there was an investment in building a data pipeline around AWS state. And the way it's being done is all the AWS accounts APIs, the same APIs that cartography are calling, are being called in a good rhythm, right? So they figured out the throttling and so on, and they're capturing this across hundreds of thousands of AWS accounts in the data lake, and the data is organized. Each API is actually broke down into tables, and you can also ask the raw data, the raw JSON data out of it, which allows us, or at least in the case of cartography, well, it allows us to actually go query the data extremely fast. So we don't rely on API, we just rely on how fast the data lake is. And the way the discussion I guess I'm having with a couple of engineers is, one option is we write our own sort of cartography and replicate the schema that cartography has, so that we can use the analysis job in the same type of query, basically having parity with cartography schema, but not use cartography. And the hacky way we could do this is with load JSON or load CSV very rapidly. So we would use the backend Neo4j import, which is super fast. So that's one option. The disadvantage of that is we lose all the data ingestion and data augmentation and unit tests and so on cartography.
Right.
Another option that we've explored is to override the get functions. So if my memory is correct, we have sync, get, and load kind of pattern. I might be forgetting one of them. I don't think we have a transform pattern, but I think it's like sync, get, load. And if we override the current get, and instead of basically providing an override to the get that says, okay, can we make the change agnostic of the sync function, and get the cartography to actually use our own get functions to go get the data from the data lake instead of the AWS API? That would be kind of an easy, not easy, but that would be kind of a well-integrated method of doing this without having to rewrite the whole stack. So we're currently working on this. How do we bring this back to open source? We're focusing on our scenario first, and then the second is like, okay, how do we generalize the approach? But if you, Alex, at Lyft and other people are already working on this, we might bring generalized approach for AWS and other Intel modules faster. I think this is more kind of an Intel module ask. Is do you have the ability to actually specify where you're getting the data and have agility there?
Right.
And the load and ingestion flow remains the same.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the context is I'm actually right now I have about 15 to 16,000 AWS accounts to load. And that's a technical scaling issue, but the real issue is actually getting access to them. So in a large corporation of like the amount of effort to actually go ask people to bootstrap cartography to all of them is the real challenge, right? Then there's a technical side. So going through the data lake allows us to actually get all the data we need by asking permission from one group versus the whole.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this was just for a little bit of context for anyone joining in. I think that we talked about this a little bit last month when Ming brought up the idea of decoupling the sync step into like separate parts, so that what you could do is that you could have something else be your getter, something else get all of that stuff from your sources of truth, and then cartography have like just take whatever that is and then load it into the graph that way. And we talked about designing like a little bit of a community spec to get some eyes on it. And I think Ming said that he was going to like, I feel like I'm just going to build it. And, that's awesome. I would like to see like where that's at. And then, I would like to help there too, because I think that there's value in that, especially when you reach this big 16,000 plus account scale.
Yeah, that's our sample set, by the way.
Yeah.
Because we are onboarding cartography
for the installation too. So if you go for that scale, that's
sorry, sorry, Christoph, can you repeat? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, no, I'm just adding that if you go for that scale, 16,000 AWS accounts, you have for that a very beefy 4G installation.
Yeah. And we're not using.
I think then the whole load infrastructure, so how you load the data in cartography, has to be as well rethinked, because it's now a monolithic process. So you got to scale out.
Yeah, from I would say ingestion into Neo4j, we're not using community edition, for example. So that's where Neo4j clustering and enterprise features comes in to help out. Yeah. But the getting the data from AWS API, that's even getting access to the AWS account is a logistical nightmare in such a large company. We're over 1 million employee company.
I mean, I'm importing at the moment from 12 accounts, and that was enough.
Yeah. We've got similar scale numbers there, and then even then, that's it. Another point I want to bring up too, I think that you're alluding to this also, Sasha, is that well, maybe not. I'll bring this up that I think that Neo4j is a great analysis tool. It's not a great data lake tool, and if we use it as a data lake, if you've got a certain amount of scale, even if you add in those features such as horizontal scaling and clustering, it's still kind of a square peg round hole kind of problem. And you want to be able to take your big data lake of data. So you have your 16,000 AWS accounts, perhaps have them individually push to this data lake. And then you want to take a slice of that, throw it onto a Neo4j instance, do your analysis there, do whatever you need with it there, and then call it a day.
Yeah, but I see a combination of integration in data lake and DAG together.
Yeah.
So DAG is going to my understanding of it is going to be able to help you define what you want to pull and the sequence of it, right? So I may say, I don't want the whole AWS. I only want these pieces. And through the interdependencies, I can visualize and I can control that. And then connect back to the data lake to actually do it super fast. So I think you've seen similar pattern with Cosmos as well at Microsoft, right? So, once you start hitting that scale, and our version of cartography, or what is currently open source that is not designed for that. And I think what I'm trying to push as much as I can and get Amazon to contribute back is how do we bring it up to that level?
Awesome. Yeah, I think it sounds like we need to start working on a bit of a community spec. What do you think?
I agree. There's a few experimentation, but I think a community spec starts making sense,
Okay.
and have like kind of a follow-up rhythm. What are the reasonable objectives? Let's just capture the scenarios in a very crisp scenario. You know me a little bit. Like, don't talk to me about how unless we actually figure out what we need to build. So
100%.
I think the why is clear. Okay, large scale, fast database integration, data pipeline. The what is a little bit clearer, but still foggy, and then how is we don't know.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'll start up a little skeleton, and then you can contribute and shoot ideas there.
Maybe I think the person's name was Ming.
Yep, that was Ming.
Maybe we can circle back with him and say, hey, because I did get the feeling he was moving fast. Where is he at? And that could be a good test case. I will loop in. So Andrew, who has contributed before to the project, as of last night, that's his purpose right now. That's not his purpose, but that's what he's focusing on in a scrappy way. So I think bringing him back into the conversation might be useful. Similar with permission modeling with AWS organization, we have someone from automated reasoning at Amazon that's looking at that space and trying to make contribution to a more complete view of permission modeling. So I may bring two Andrews back in the conversation. Both of them are named Andrew.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. Are we good to move on to the next topic?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so you brought up the idea of moving cartography to more neutral ground, not just hosting it within Lyft itself. And to that point, I have a little bit of something that we are trying out. I'm not sure if, I don't think we announced it in the channel yet, but then me and Marco, we are going to be presenting at Cloud Native Security Day. And the hope there is to get a kind of the meta point of our presentation. The hope is to raise interest in CNCF and then see what people want the tool to do and get a little lot of interest there. And then so we're hoping that if CNCF's SIG security has interest in this, then that would help us with our process of moving toward the foundation and see what kind of that process would look like. So we're going to do a little bit of probing there. Again, I guess another thing that I want to ask you guys for thoughts is, what would be our why for moving to neutral ground? One feedback that I've gotten when I've asked others who had gone the open source route and the foundation route is, well, you have to keep in mind that moving to a foundation is a lot of work, and the amount of payoff that you get for it is what you get in return is you get a lot of growth, you get a lot of you get to grow your community. If you're happy with how your community is going without needing to take on the overhead of a foundation, then there's no real reason to do that. But it depends on the goals of the project.
What is Lyft stands, and so I'm looking at sort of kind of a risk here. Maybe the neutral ground you're referring to maybe too much, right? Is I'm trying to formulate it because this is an official question. Right? So, like, what happens? Like, what is Lyft investment behind cartography, and what happens if the people at Lyft that are currently working on it, including yourself, are no longer there?
Right.
what is the community ability now to move forward? There's a very, I believe I am an approver for PR,
Mhm.
and I don't work at Lyft anymore. If you get hit by a bus, Alex, what happens?
Right. I guess the idea there's nothing from a legal perspective that would stop the community from, I guess, from practical matters, like making a fork of the entire project, since it's already, I think, Apache a license or whatever, make a fork of the project and then go completely off of that.
That, I have strong opinions with forks.
Right.
And they're not optimistic.
Right, and then you fragment the community, and it's just messy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my motivation behind the question is more kind of a risk management. Is like, what happens?
Sure.
I'm investing quite a bit. Though the investment hasn't made it to open source yet, but that's coming. And what happens? And as the sort of, this is a child that I brought to the table that I'm sort of delegating, or I want to spread their wings. I want to make sure that initial sort of project doesn't get bogged down by corporate challenges and decisions.
Sure.
Not saying that Lyft has been a great contributor and support of the project, and I appreciate my journey there as well. What's the path forward? What happens if Alex get hit by a bus, or Martin gets hit by a bus, right?
Right.
But so I have zero history on the project, but I mean knowledge. But to me, the big question when you want to make such a step is what you want to achieve. Actually.
Yeah.
What is the aim? Because obviously, for the sake of moving to under a foundation, it's okay. Let's do it. But what will be better? What's missing? What cartography misses at the moment? And then maybe based on that you can define.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as assurance, right? Like, to me, the real motivation is enable cartography to continue growing, regardless if Lyft is around or not.
And you feel that Lyft is sort of has what it needs from it, and
Lyft is Lyft. If you look at the stock market, it's not going very well. It's not that I don't trust Lyft. Quite the contrary. I have high trust in Lyft and high trust in some of the people behind the project. In the short term, is that enough? For me, yes. In the long term, I like to get a little bit more clarity.
Mm-hmm. And you feel that the licensing, so the open source licensing, doesn't ensure this. It doesn't then ensure the flexibility. You still see risks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't worry about, for example, Alex, sort of what is the worst case is we fork the code and we just spin it up elsewhere. If that comes to that, it's not too bad, but I'd like to avoid that. So I guess the Lyft ownership and Lyft control at this point, right? For example, this meeting did not happen until Alex showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, you are right. I mean, the risk mitigation, in case if it's in kind of under company control, the risk mitigation is forking what you don't like.
Lyft has a very strong voice in it. And sorry, Alex, I didn't want to throw you under the bus, but I use that example as you're the representation of Lyft, right? So I apologize if I sound like I was throwing you under the bus.
No, not at all.
A quick example.
I'll let you go first, Christoph.
Yeah.
No, my question, the other thing is if we know about the user base and if we know anything about the community.
If we know about the user base and if we know about the community,
In a sense of how many people are developing, actually that's something you see on GitHub.
Right.
And if we can see how many people, how many companies are using it, because that's another driver. To me, from my perspective at the moment, I mean, but I'm completely new. I see no benefit in moving to foundation.
I think
how I see our working process, how I see how changes are approved, and how the community interacts is pretty seamless. So it's not like, after every commit or pull request, I had to think of, I wish this would be under some different governance.
Okay.
So there are no such issues at all.
So governance right now under the current license isn't a blocker for the scenarios you want to accomplish at your company.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is something that you can ask around the users or the community or anybody.
Right.
But I see that everybody is, so this is a pretty relaxed thing how it works. So
okay. Yeah, I think that there's two things here. I think that what you described, the governance not being a blocker, I think that's great. The other more practical things, the like nuts and bolts about how things are coming about, like the example Sasha brought up about this meeting not happening because I didn't start it, because it's hosted out of a Lyft Google Hangouts. We can we can fix those practical concerns. Like we can start hosting this out of a cartography based thing, so that somebody else can start that meeting. So it's not hosted out of, it doesn't have any dependence on Lyft corporate video conferencing capability and things like that. So we can make a move in that direction.
Okay, but it's another, to me, the big question is always like how pull requests are approved and how is the whole thing is defined, where it goes, basically.
Right. The way that we have it set up also is that the pull request approvers, it's not just me. There's, I think, a group of maybe like 6 of them, and 5 of them are, they're not even at Lyft.
Practically, it's only you.
Practically, it's only me. Yeah.
Or maybe there is a guy in Italy, or
yeah.
I see him sometimes accepting pull requests. So yeah, that's actually there. I see the risk on long term.
Okay.
So this is somewhat, puts you a lot of load, and the question is, what if you don't have time? I wouldn't take it to that extent, that what happens with the bus, but what happens if you have different priorities? We didn't have so far. So maybe, but I don't know that whether moving under a foundation that would fix it, actually, because it's always about people. But
yeah, Christoph, you're giving me good feedback as well. I talked about earlier, focus on the scenario and like the why and the what versus the how, and I did the reverse, right? So because we're looking at the onboard model, and I think I fixated on the onboard model, but you're right. It's like, what is the end goal, and maybe moving to the consortium is too heavyweight and doesn't really align with what we're trying to do. To me, the root problem is like, what happens if Alex get hit by a bus?
And such problems, that the practical things, these 2 points, these won't be solved by default if this gets to a foundation, because it's always about people behind. So
yeah, good point.
Yeah, so it sounds like to solve the problem of 1 or 2 PRs, then we would need to have a bigger community. Like what would you think would solve that?
The thing, Alex, is that for me it doesn't have to be solved. It's not a problem. It's just a fact. It's
got it.
At the moment, it looks super seamless, and it's not like that we would have to wait ages for merges. So to me, it's fine.
Got it.
maybe I'm super relaxed, to be honest, guys. So it's not. I understand if someone comes from the outside and maybe sees that, okay, here these are huge risks. I don't know. And this is why the user base is important, or the community. I'm just one person, and we are we have just started to explore the possibilities in the tool. So
we might find surface others. I think there's going to be an interesting conversation to really stress test the process when we're talking about sort of a community design. Because if we're proposing a design that drastically may change and is good for a couple of folks, but not good for Lyft, what happens? So it should be good for everyone, but the reality is Lyft may not want to, quote unquote, pay the cost of an upgrade. So is Lyft going to run on older version? So I think that you're calling out, it's all about the people. I agree with that. Where are they focused? Are they Lyft focused or they're cartography focused?
The other point that might be interesting, if it goes under such a foundation, maybe you can get more paid resources or dedicated resources through that. But this is something very carefully looked at.
I think
I don't know what is the business case in Lyft behind this.
I think the resourcing was a lesson learned, I believe, Alex, from Envoy, right?
Which part from Envoy?
Like the advantage of going to the consortium is it actually enabled much broader contribution because they felt that, okay, the project has wings and supported.
Yeah, the advice that I've gotten from Envoy is that only go to Foundation when you really want that growth, when you're ready for that. Because otherwise, if you don't see any blocker, then it's a lot of work for nothing. That's the advice that I've gotten from them.
I also personally learned a lesson from I'm drawing a blank, the guy who led the Envoy. I like the way you phrase it to me. It's like, in short, I wrote this, I never want to write it again. So I moved it to open source consortium so that the investment keeps growing, and whichever other company I go, it's just easy to onboard, right? So that's a personal objective. Is I do not want to rewrite this again.
Right. I think that that's you bring up a good point with the idea of if cartography because the cartography is Lyft owned, therefore, if the community decides that cartography wants to go in a different direction than what Lyft wants for Lyft's business objectives, how do we resolve that? And I guess, at least the way that I see it right now, we haven't come. It might be one of those things where it's like you cross that bridge when you get there. I don't have a good answer for that right now.
I agree. For example, I think the data lake is going to bring some good topic. One that might be coming as well is enabling cartography to a more diverse sets of graph database. The one that comes to mind where I'm personally getting a lot of good questions and challenge is, why aren't you using Neptune? That's a pretty drastic shift. That's going to be an interesting one. It's coming, but next year.
Yeah, in terms of graph database technology, as long as it has Cypher, I'm happy.
That's been my argument with Neptune. It doesn't. So
yeah.
My rationale behind the use of Neo4j from the argument I've used for many years is ease of use. Basically, the community edition has enough bells and whistles that it's extremely useful. And the query language basically allows you to do query on the fly just the same as SQL. Now, it's possible with other graph database now, but at the time when we were looking at it 6 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Right. So kind of on this point, what I'm going to be trying to do I'm going to be trying to gather interest in other foundations and other places for if they would even have interest in having cartography be a member of any of these organizations. Just kind of send feelers in the background and see like because if there's no interest from the foundation itself, then it's like, why are we, I don't know. It has to have like a good, yeah, we got to lay out the foundation for that. And then like, if you're interested also, Sasha, like I think that, you know, I can maybe loop you into some of those discussions and, you know, maybe do a little bit of your own reaching out to different contacts there. But for the time being, it sounds like what we're going to do is acknowledge these shortcomings or facts and address those problems when we reach them.
Yeah, once you hit, I think that's the reason I bring it up once in a while, is like, let's not lose necessarily track of it. I think we made some progress today where I had a solution in mind, but I wasn't thinking too much on the why. I guess I carried over some internal conversation when I was at LIFT where, okay, the route is we follow what Onboard has done. We are, I think, at a very different maturity stage.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just for the record, the other big thing is the sort of the business model behind the software. So as long as it remains like in this very open model and there is no enterprise or paid or subscription edition, I think this is not that again a fact that doesn't push the project into thinking about a different model.
There's more and more, I know two commercial grade cartography out there right now, one more mature than the other, but you bring a good point. That's a question that's actually been asked to me, is why don't you build a business behind it, which will be a pretty significant driver for innovation in it. That's just not what I'm interested in personally, but I think, you know, if someone wants to do that, I'll, you know, thumbs up on it.
Yeah, I
mean
mean
that commercial cartographies, that similar products or product based on cartography?
Similar, not based on cartography. That'd be interesting though.
Yeah. I know some companies that are investing internally in cartography, but yeah, no commercial product that depends on it. I think Graphity was looking at building a connector for it. I don't know what the status is, but at least I don't know any commercial product that depends on it.
Good.
That's actually a good idea. You should come more often to those meetings, Christoph. It's you know, if you find a way to integrate that, I think that's going to drive a lot of innovation. I totally agree.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, thanks for joining in, Christoph. This is some really helpful discussion and feedback.
Yeah.
No worries, guys.
Yeah, I look at cartography as a pet project. So I have my sort of engineering heart into it. I don't have my business sense into it intentionally. But you're bringing a good point, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we get a lot of benefit from having this as an open project the way that it's been. You get, I like the potential that we have with this community that we've been growing.
But you get some challenges, like I won't name names, but a couple of people reach out to me. I know one company for a fact that was really debating between making a legitimate investment in cartography and bar raise it and build a UI, right? And they prefer the cartography open model versus the other commercial vendor, but they went with the other commercial vendor because of what is going to be the maintenance, the support, and so on. I know another one that's happening in the financial industry. This is not Amazon, somebody else who reached out to me at the VP level, and he's having that internal question right now. So the extensibility and flexibility is a big plus, but are they really going to put their money and resource behind something that may or may not be supported? So that's their internal debate.
Yeah, there's lots of factors why a company would go for open versus something that has enterprise support. And obviously, yeah, we don't have enterprise support.
Yeah, and I've mentioned to you, Alex, if the commercial vendors are not in your list of options as a Lyft employee, question it, right? They should be there.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Do we have anything else that you guys want to bring up or anything like that? If not, I'm actually curious, Christoph. Like, can you tell us a little bit about how you use the product, and then in the last couple of minutes that we have?
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, such a very, very embryonical or embryonal way. So what we do, I mean, that's off the record. No, not off the record. Then
I can turn off the recording also. I think we're good. Yeah, I'll turn it off right now. All right. Yep. Thanks everybody. Okay. So.